Alright guys, hello, this is Monday, May 4th. So for Algebra 1, what y'all have to do today is y'all have a quiz. This is going to be quiz 35 to start off. And so what you're going to do on it, this is going to be least common denominators. And so I'm going to do one up on the board with least common denominator. Remember, the least common denominator is what's the biggest thing each of them have in common. So if you look at number 1, you're going to try to see what do they have in common. What's the biggest one that each of them have in common? Notice that the x has an a under it, the y doesn't, and the z has an a under it. So that means the least common denominator with the a is going to be the a. Then you're going to look at the b. Notice the x has a b under it, the y has a b under it, but the z doesn't, and so still the highest one's a b. And you do the same thing for the c and you work it through. I'm going to do one like 5 through 8. So notice what I have is 11 over 2x plus 4 plus 2 over x plus 3, x plus 2. So what I'm going to do is first I have to factor the bottom if I can. This one they already had it factored. They already did guess and check for me and got to that. But this other one they did not. So if I'm going to factor that out, what do they have in common? Well, they have a 4 in common. So I can factor that out to 11 over bring out the 4 will go into 12x, that leaves me a 3x plus, and then 1. So that'll give me a 4 plus 3x plus 1. So then I have the plus 2, just rewrite. So then I have to say, okay, what do they have in common? If this one over here had an x plus 3, then I only have to write it once. It's basically up until its highest point. But notice that this one has a 4 and a 3x plus 1. So this one doesn't. So that's going to be one of them. So 4 times 3x plus 1. It's going to be one part of your least common denominator. This one has an x plus 3. That one doesn't. So I have to include it. And then this one has an x plus 2, that one doesn't, so I have to include it. And basically what we want, so that's going to be our denominator. Basically what we're going to do then to the numerator is multiply them by the ones they don't have. So notice that this one doesn't have the x plus 3 and the x plus 2, so I'm going to multiply 11 times x plus 3 times x plus 2, since that's what it didn't have. Okay? And then that's all over that thing on the bottom. And then this one doesn't have the 4, 3x plus 1. So I'm going to multiply this other one. So I'm going to multiply 2 times 4, 3x plus 1. And then it's all over 4, 3x plus 1. X plus 3, x plus 2. Alright, so now I can combine it and see what happens. I can combine the 11 times the x plus 3, x plus 2, and then I add this. Notice none of it cancels, none of this can be added together. I can go ahead and do the 2 times the 4, and that basically gives me an 8. But that's about all I can do, and since it's all over that, then that's going to simply be our answer. And so again, at the end, if you can cancel something from that has it in common with all of it, you can cancel, but that's how it's going to work. And so at least common denominator is going to work like that. One, I'll show you kind of the skip a step and kind of show you kind of one thing. So for example, if you work your problem and got x plus 2 times x plus 5 up here, and then on the bottom you had x plus 2, x minus 3, x plus 1. Notice there's no addition up top. The reason I couldn't cancel on the one I just did was because I had addition up top. This one doesn't have addition, it's just straight multiplication. So notice that the x plus 2's cancel, and so that answer would reduce down to just x plus 5 over x minus 3 times x plus 1. So it'd just be that, because these are going to cancel. So if it's multiplication up top and that's all it is, you can cancel at that point. Addition, you have to be more careful with. And so that's pretty much going to help you with the quiz. Again, on any of this, if you have any questions, you can get up with me and I can kind of go through them with you. But that'll pretty much take us through the quiz. So y'all go ahead and do that right now, and then we'll come back to today's lesson. All right, so today's lesson deals with, this is on page 437. This deals with complex fractions. And so how to do your complex fraction is basically you have to find a common denominator. Basically a complex fraction, first of all, is just where you have a fraction on the top and a fraction on the bottom. So notice here on number 1 in the book, notice you have 3/8 on top and then 5 minus 1/8 on the bottom, so you have another fraction on the bottom. So that's going to be a complex fraction. The way you work these is you're going to basically find the common denominator for everything you can. So for example, on the bottom, have 5 minus 1/8. So to be able to do that subtraction, you got to, when you subtract, you have to have a common denominator. So that means I have to find the common denominator. It's going to be an 8. And so that means I want to make this something all over 8. Well, to do that, I have to multiply by an 8 on the bottom here, so an 8 on the bottom there. So notice it's 8, so I have to multiply by an 8 here because that's what it's missing. So then when you do that, 8 times 5 is 40. So in other words, it's 40 over 8. And then the 1 over 8 stays the same, so then it'd be 40 plus 1 over 8. So then you can do that, you have 3 over 8 on top still. So then you can do the addition now, 40 plus 1 is 41. So on the bottom you have 41 over 8. On the top you still have just 3 over 8. Okay, now we have 3 over 8 divided by 41 over 8. When we divide, we multiply by the reciprocal. And so really what I'm going to do to solve this one is I'm just going to do 3 over 8 times the reciprocal of 41 over 8, which is 8 over 41. So you just flip it. So 8 over 41. Okay, notice here what happens. The 8's in this case are going to cancel. Well, yeah, so those will cancel with 1, and so you're going to link up with 3 over 41 as your answer for that one, which would reduce again to 1 over 13. So that would be how you do it. You can do it the long way. You can do 3 times 8 is 24. Do it the long way. And then you would do 8 times 41, and then you would reduce that down. And so pretty much that's all you're going to be doing though, is just reducing the fraction and then going through and working it. So I'll do number 4. So number 4, they can throw in variables here. The variable they do is going to be right here it says 2 minus 1 over x, 1 plus 1 over x. And so what I have going on is you have to find the common variable for both of them now. So x is the variable on the bottom, x is the variable on the bottom, so we have to do it twice for both top and bottom. I'll do the top first. So the top, to find the common denominator, has to be an x. So then when I multiply this 2, has to be multiplied by an x on top and an x on bottom. That way you get the common denominator. So the x is the common denominator. To do that, the 2 has to be multiplied by x, which would give me 2x. So that would be that one with the common denominator. Now the bottom one, again, same way. The x is in the bottom, so I have to multiply by an x times this other term. So I have to multiply by an x here and the x on the bottom. That way you get the common denominator. So that would be 1 times x would be the x. And then plus 1 with the denominator on the bottom. So that's all you have to do. You're finding your common denominator. The 1 doesn't have an x on the bottom, so that means we have to get 1 there by multiplying by the x over x. So whatever you multiply by the bottom, you also have to multiply by the top. So get it on the bottom, multiply by x on the bottom, then multiply by x on the top to get it to even out. So then we get to this step. Now to do this, we're just going to multiply by the reciprocal. And so it's going to be 2x minus 1 over x times x over x plus 1. And so again, what happens here is the x's are going to cancel. And then that leaves you with just 2x minus 1 over x plus 1 as your answer. And then you have to make sure when you're doing this, set each denominator equal to 0 that does not appear in the final answer. So every time you get an x in the denominator, you have to set that equal to 0 except at the very end. So notice right here when I got this x in the denominator right there, it canceled, but because it was there, I have to set that equal to 0, and so x cannot equal 0. Because if x equals 0, then this would mess up at that step right there. So you don't have to do it at the end, but every part where you get an x in the denominator, if it doesn't end up in the end, then you have to set that equal to 0 to figure out where it cannot equal 0. And so notice here, this one was an x plus 1, but that showed up in my answer, so I don't have to do it. I had to set this one equal to 0 because it didn't show up in my answer, it canceled. And so your answer would be x cannot equal 0, and it simplifies down to 2x minus 1 over x plus 1. So that would be number 4. Next we'll do number 5. So number 5, same thing. You have your denominator here on top and bottom. I'll do the top first. So I have 1 over x, 3 over x. And so my denominator is an x, so that means I have to get a common denominator to be able to add it. So the denominator has to be an x. Well, if I multiply by an x on the bottom, that means I have to multiply by an x on the top as well. And so when I do that, you're going to end up with x times 1 is x, and then plus the 3 over x. Alright, so that's the top one. The bottom one, same way. I have a 4 on the bottom, so I have to make this a 4 on the bottom. So when you do that, you have to multiply by top and bottom. And so 4 times 2 is 8, so I have 8 over 4, and then minus the x over 4, so it looks like that. Just rewriting it as 1 with a common denominator. So now I have top divided by bottom, so I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal, and so I'm going to multiply x plus 3 over x, then I'm going to flip this bottom one, and so I'm going to multiply by 4 over 8 minus x. Okay? So then you're going to do your multiplication. You can try to cancel if something cancels. So notice here, nothing's going to cancel, so I just have to multiply it. So I'll wind up with 4 times x plus 3. I'm not going to distribute it all the way through. I'm just going to leave it for a second. So I'm going to do 4x plus 3 on top. Then I'm going to do x times 8 minus x. So x times 8 minus x. And then for number 5, that's as far as it can go. The only thing you can do to try to make it clean up a little bit is pull out a negative so that this on the bottom will flip. And so if you do that, you can pull out the negative, and basically your answer would just be 4 times x plus 3 times x times, and then this, we're pulling out the negative here, so it's not a minus x. And so it'll basically end up just doing x minus 8. It'll flip those two signs. So the 8 will become negative, and the x will become positive. And so that is if we pulled out the negative. Either one of these steps would be right. I would be okay if you get to this step. If you technically you're supposed to go ahead and pull out the negative and get to this step, but this step right here is fine once you get there. And so, and the reason you pull out the negative is simply because you have that negative x right there, and we normally want x to be positive. So that is going to be number 5. Number 8. I'll erase this just to give a little bit more room. Number 8 says 1 over x plus 3 and 1 over x squared minus 1. So again, same process. I need to get the common denominator. So notice the denominator is an x on the top, so it has to be an x all the way through. So that means I have to multiply this 3 times x over x, so that way I can get the denominator of an x. So when I do that, it'll be 1 over x, and then 3 times x is plus 3x. So it'll be 1 plus 3x over x. The denominator, notice that the x squared is in the denominator, so I have to multiply it through. So I have to multiply this 1 times an x squared over an x squared. So when I do that, I'm going to leave up with an x squared on bottom, and then 1 minus negative 1 times x squared, which is negative x squared. Okay, so again, working this through, I'm going to have to multiply by the reciprocal. And so when I do that, it's going to be 1 plus 3x over x times, flip this over, so it'd be x squared over 1 minus x squared. Now notice I can try to look to cancel. Notice I have an x squared and an x, so that's going to cancel 1x, so that x is going to go away. That's going to go away and leave me with just 1, so that'll kind of help simplify the multiplication. Because 1x on bottom, x squared is 2x's, that means the x cancels here and just leaves me with 1. This x squared cancels one of the x's out, leaves me just with an x. So then I have 1 plus 3x times x on top, and on bottom I have a 1 times a 1 minus x squared, so it's just 1 minus x squared on bottom. Now, I can try to do a couple different things here. First off, I have this negative x squared, so I want to pull that negative out. So I just pull that negative out by flipping it. So when I do that, I'm going to pull the negative outside, and so it'll just become negative x times 1 plus 3x. And then on bottom, you just flip the sign, so it'll be x squared plus 1. So if you ever have a negative x, you just pull out the negative and flip all the signs. And so, or negative x minus 1, my bad. X squared minus 1. Alright, so then this bottom will actually factor. If you set x squared equal to 1, then it would be x equals plus or minus 1, square rooting both sides. Square root of x squared is x, square root of 1 is plus or minus 1. So this x squared on the bottom is really x plus 1, x minus 1, so we can factor that. And so your final answer then would be negative x times 1 plus 3x all over x plus 1, x minus 1. So again, we had to factor that. You could have done guess and check there, trying to get to a 0x, or you could have just said x squared equal to 1 and square root both sides. Either way, you get negative x, 1 plus 3x on top, and then x plus 1, x minus 1 on bottom. And so that is your answer. Now, you have to keep in mind, did I have anywhere where that didn't wind up in my answer that I had an x in the bottom that could have been equal to 0? Okay, the x squared minus 1 ended up in my answer, so that's good. But notice here I had an x that canceled. Right there, that x that canceled, I have to set that equal to 0 because that did not end up in my final answer. And so x cannot equal to 0. So your final answer would also have to have the condition that x cannot equal 0. So basically, anytime you cancel anything, you have to keep in mind that you have to account for that in the end by saying x can't equal whatever that equal to. So I would just have to set x equal to 0 since it went away, it's not another answer. And so that would be how you do it. So again, the big lesson is just getting the common denominator, flipping, and multiplying by the reciprocal. Alright, number 10, the last one we'll do in here. Number 10 says 2 minus y over x minus 3. So what's the common denominator from the top? It is an x minus 3, so I have to multiply the 2 times an x minus 3 on top and an x minus 3 on bottom. That will give me 2 times x minus 3. And then minus y, or 4, minus 4. Okay, so that takes care of the top. And the bottom, I have an x minus 3 in the denominator, so I have to multiply the 6 times an x minus 3 on top and bottom. When I do that, it'll leave me with 6 times x minus 3. Again, I don't want to distribute that yet. I can just leave it. So 6 times x minus 3 minus 2. So that's what I got right now. Alright, to clean this up, since I have addition and subtraction going on, I'm going to go ahead and do the distribution and clean it up. And so when I do that, it'll give me 2 times x is 2x. Then 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. Then we'll do negative 6 minus 4 will give me a negative 10. So all that simplifies to 2x minus 10 over x minus 3. Okay, then I'm going to be multiplying by the reciprocal. I've got to flip this. So I'll multiply by the reciprocal. So I'm going to have an x minus 3 up top. I'm going to go ahead and clean this up as I write it down here on the bottom. So 6 times x is 6x. 6 times negative 3 is negative 18. Negative 18 minus 2 is negative 20. So negative 18 and negative 18 minus 2 is negative 20. So 6x minus 20 is what this cleans up to. So this should be 6x minus 20. This should be 2x minus 10. Then when you flip it, you wind up with 2x minus 10 over x minus 3. And then x minus 3, you have to flip up top, and the 6x minus 20 go on the bottom. So then the question is, okay, I can try to simplify this down. And so what happens is the x minus 3s are going to cancel. Now keep in mind what happens when I cancel something when I'm working through this problem. You have to keep in mind that you have to keep track of that. So I know my final answer is going to have x minus 3 cannot equal 0. And so add 3 to both sides. So x cannot equal 3. So I know that right off the bat simply because I canceled those out, and it's not going to wind up in my original answer, but I have to keep track of it. So I know x cannot equal 3. Continuing to work here, it'll just be 2x minus 10 over 6x minus 20, and you're done. The only question is, can I pull anything out to kind of simplify this a little bit? So notice the 2x and the negative 10 have something in common. They both have a 2 in common. So if I pull a 2 out, that will leave me 2x minus 5. 2 will go on the 2x 2 times. Leave me the x here. 2 will go on the 10, negative 5 times. And so on the bottom, do 6 and 20 have anything in common? They have a 2. And so I can pull out a 2, and that will leave me a 3x minus 2 will go into that, 20, 10. So 2 will go into 6. 3x, 2 will go into 20, 10. Then notice what happens is those 2's cancel, and so your final answer would just be x minus 5 equals 3x minus 10. So again, it's a lot of work, but it's not really difficult work. You just have to be diligent and work your way through it. And again, since we canceled up here, our x cannot equal 3. So that'll be, the homework will be 1 through 16. If you have any questions, just get up with me, but that'll be our lesson for today. And so just be diligent with it, work it through, do your best. If you have any questions, get up with me, but that'll be all we have for today. So again, it's homework is page 437, 1 through 16. And I hope y'all have a good day and do well.